Hello, APSO family. Welcome back to another live interview with our Wellness Wisdom authors. Today, I am here with registered psychotherapist and the author. She contributed in our book, Wellness Wisdom, and today we're going to be talking with her. So please welcome Heather Kent. Hello, Heather. How are you?
Hello, I'm well, thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Oh my gosh, do you have any New Year resolutions?
So I'm not much of a resolutions person, but I do set like goals, like yearly goals to work on because I find that when we set goals, they're more like attainable. You can break them down into steps on how you're going to get there versus resolutions are very, um, I'm going to work out every day and I'm going to, lose 50 pounds. And it's very arbitrary and difficult to track versus, okay, I specifically want to do this thing this year. And these are the steps I'm going to do to get it. And sometimes I focus more on skills development versus setting goals or resolutions because it's what's a new skill that I want to develop that'll help me to get to those goals. So
Yeah.
yes, I do have some. I have goals for this year.
I love that. And I'm going to pick on that a little bit later as well as to what your goals are. But thank you so much for joining us on our show today. And I'm really happy to have you here. So, the one thing that we always start off with, like the first question I always ask is, who are you and what do you do?
So, my name is Heather Kent, and I am a registered psychotherapist in Ontario, Canada. And my background and training is specifically in trauma assessment and um, recovery from PTSD, so treatment of PTSD symptoms.
Very nice. And why did you decide to kind of go on this career pathway?
So I was a teacher for 11 years, and then I went back to school to do my master's in psychology. Um, and it was interesting because there's a bit of a twofold answer to that. One of the big motivators was actually the students that I worked with. I worked in a very rough area, very low socioeconomics, with lots of racially charged issues. So I witnessed a lot of trauma being experienced by my students in high school. And so it was very difficult to expect them to, sit down and be a student when there was all this other ongoing trauma going in their lives happening in the background, like not knowing where their next meal is coming from, or their parents are in prison, or somebody that they loved got shot last week. And so these are extremely difficult things that the students were dealing with, and then they come to school and they're expected to sit down and pay attention, right? And so it's just it felt like I was doing an inadequate job because I was not able to actually help them with what was going on for them and help them in any real way. And so that was part of my motivation for going back to get my master's, so that I would be able to help people with those things to then allow them to show up and function better in their lives. And then myself, I'm also a survivor of abusive relationship, and so I can attest to how it feels to have to do the recovery work from being in a traumatic experience.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that because that's a lot of like deep information that I don't think is very mainstream. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being so compassionate. Like to have a teacher who's fully aware of what's going on in the classroom and to really look at your students is a real inspiration to that. So you said you were a survivor of like abusive relationships. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? I know in your chapter as well, you kind of talked about that.
Yeah, so I was in a long-term relationship with a person who suffered from narcissistic personality disorder for 8 years, and it was a very bumpy ride. um, and in the end, it was actually in therapy where it became apparent to me and was pointed out to me by the therapist, by a couples therapist, interestingly enough, that the relationship was really unhealthy and that I needed to leave.
Hmm. And was that kind of like your main trigger to leave, like as soon as the therapist said, or what? Like, what was the last straw for you?
Um, So it's usually, well, for me in my situation, it's a slow buildup of things that happen over time. But because it is so slow and very insidious, you can't always see what's happening because the
Mhm.
manipulation is very subtle, and
Right.
your boundaries get eroded slowly over time. And so it isn't necessarily like a one big thing that happened, but it's just the accumulation of yeah, like manipulation and control tactics, and doing things to make you think that you're crazy, or blaming you for everything that happens. And I mean, I really believe, I fully felt that every problem or every moment of unhappiness for him was my responsibility and my fault, and then
Mm.
I had to do something to fix it and make it better. And so um, that kind of develops over time as a result of the prolonged exposure to these types of things. But in the end, it did get quite ugly. There was some manipulation that happened where he attempted to um, like brainwash my family and use my family against me to achieve the ends that he wanted. And so that was really the final thing that happened.
Wow. And here you are today. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
As well, because it's definitely not an easy thing to leave those kinds of relationships there. And would you kind of describe this as like more of like a toxic relationship? And
Oh, it's
what
absolutely
are,
toxic.
what are
Very,
some
very
of the
toxic.
red flags here?
So, I mean, yeah, what are the signs that you're being manipulated, or signs that you might be in an emotionally abusive relationship? So, um, if a person that you're with is never able to have accountability, so they can't take responsibility for their actions, they're not able to admit that they've done something wrong, or they might say, yeah, I did that, and I'm sorry, but you forced me to do that. Like, I would never have done that if you hadn't have done this. This is really your fault because you did this first. So this is an example of what we call gaslighting. And so
Mhm.
gaslighting is actually a really popular tactic that is used by abusive people to make you question your reality, make you question like your memory, your perception of what happened, and really over time also eradicates your belief that you do like have all of your faculties, like that makes you think that you're going crazy. I actually spoke with someone yesterday who shared with me that her partner had convinced her so much that she had lost her memory to the point that she went to see a neurologist
Oh my
because
goodness.
she was so concerned that she was actually like losing her mind and wanted to have like cognitive testing done.
Wow. And it
So
wasn't the case.
no, it was not the case. And so but this is what happens. And so gaslighting is a really big one. And it's hard to pick up on it because again, like this is a person who you're with, right? So if it's a partner, you're like, oh, well, they have my best interests in mind. They wouldn't lie to me. Like I must be misremembering, or maybe I did overreact, or did that not really happen? Was it a dream? Like you really start to question what it is that they're saying, because, and this is again a way for them to deflect responsibility
Mhm.
and or accuse you. Another way that they might gaslight you is they might say you're overreacting, that was just a joke, you're too sensitive. Or if you're PMSing, if you're a woman, right? And they'll say like you're blowing this out of proportion, or I never said that, or you're twisting my words, or, that never happened. Those types of things. And control is another big red flag. So if you find that your social network or your support system has gotten smaller and smaller over time. Now, I mean, we've been isolated because of the pandemic, which is a separate issue. But if you find that you've been like your world has narrowed to your partner and the relationship, and
Mhm.
nothing beyond that, or like your immediate nuclear family, then that's a huge problem, because the isolation is something that they want, so that you don't reach out for help, or you don't have someone to bounce ideas off of, you don't have someone else calling out what they're doing.
Ah, so they're like your one, if they're your one source of communication and stability, that's another big sign. For
Yeah.
those who are watching, who kind of have ignored these red flags and they're like, he still loves me or she still loves me. What is the breaking point? What is the one sign that if you see, it's time to run, it's time to get help?
Well, I mean, one of the, I think, big misconceptions that society has in general is that abuse does not exist unless there's physical violence.
Hmm, okay.
And that could not be further from the truth. Abuse happens long before the bruises and cuts ex- uh, appear.
Right.
Um, People do not only physically abuse. Um, any punch, any slap, any strangulation, all of those things happen with emotional abuse backing it up, right? And so my kind of view of physical violence is that it's the last manifestation of abuse. That the abuse has been present
Hmm.
for a long time, and that finally, the abuser has no other outlet to take control other than to exert physical force. And so the physical violence part, in my view, is sort of the last
Right.
manifestation of abuse. But abuse and its long-term damaging effects are present long before any physical violence exists.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. And one of our viewers agrees with you. Her name is Anissa. She says abusers take control from the beginning, way before physical violence.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about power and control, and
Hmm.
like winning or losing. And so, um, financial abuse is another one that people don't necessarily think about or understand. If your partner is controlling the finances, if your partner is not allowing you to have freedom to have access to finances, if they insist that you shouldn't be working because of your contributions to the home and to the family and it would run better, but then they limit your kind of access to funding and money and being able to do and pay for things independently and on your own. Financial abuse is another really, really common one, that people, I think, don't understand, or we don't talk about it as much. But I have had a lot of clients who have suffered significant financial abuse at the hands of their abusive partners.
Oh wow. And as we're talking about like looking at these signs, can we look at kind of like the healing? Like how should different victims of abuse reach out? Are there any like resources you recommend?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've actually written a couple of books, specifically on healing from. Yeah, so I have a book that's called "I Left My Toxic Relationship. Now What?" And I have another book that I wrote that is specific to healing from narcissistic abuse, because it's very specific and very damaging. And so this is a traumatic experience, and so what we're dealing with is learning how to heal from our trauma, right? How to heal our symptoms. And so a lot of my clients, they don't realize that what they've experienced and how they're feeling and what they're thinking right
It's
now is a result of PTSD, because they've been exposed to this abusive situation for so long. And so it's really a journey of PTSD recovery. And so that needs to happen with a licensed professional. It's not something that you can do on your own. Um,
Mhm.
Reading self-help books and looking at videos from therapists are very, very helpful. But in order to engage in the work for you personally, you have to find a trauma therapist who specializes in this type of work.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Yeah, I think there's still a bit of stigma around going to therapists and psychologists and getting help. So I really like that you said that it's personal, it's for you, and it's catered towards your needs and like getting over your own personal trauma because it differs from everything. So thank you so much for that because I think it encourages actually getting help. Another question that I have towards specifically towards like narcissistic abuse is,
Mhm.
does it change the behavior? Does it change between a man and a woman? For example, like, is a woman's behavior like narcissistically, is it different from
Not really.
no,
No.
all the same signs?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the kind of the hallmark. Like I have a little checklist, and I'm going to pull it up here for you. It's kind of my little
Ooh,
litmus. Like, is my partner a narcissist test? So,
I love
um, I'm just going to pull that up here really quickly to be able to go through. As I don't want to miss. I don't want to miss any of them.
that.
I put this together for like different teachings and workshops that I do for folks. And so, yeah, so the whole is my partner a narcissist test. Here are some questions to answer yes or no to. Number one, does my partner experience an exaggerated sense of self importance? So, do they think that they are more important than other people? Do they require constant admiration or validation or attention from others? Do they expect total compliance from others? Do they struggle to recognize the emotions and needs of other people? And this is really the hallmark of narcissism here, because narcissism does not include empathy. So, a person with a narcissistic personality feels no empathy, is not capable of thinking about how other people feel, thinking about how their actions might impact others, or even if that is pointed out to them, they simply don't care. It doesn't matter to them because all that matters to them is their agenda, and the ends always justify the means for them. And so this is a really, really big one. Do they struggle to recognize and think about the emotions and the needs of other people?
Mm.
Does my partner ever expect special treatment or favors from others? Like the rules don't apply to them? Are there double standards? Do they ever experience heightened jealousy, either about the success of others or maybe who you're spending time with? Are they always comparing themselves to other people? Do they
Mhm.
have that whole keeping up with the Joneses thing? Having to have nice things, great clothes, great car, great house, expensive vacations? Um, do they insist on having the best of everything, like I mentioned?
Mhm.
And do they assume that other people must be jealous of them and their talents and their success?
Mm.
So if you're answering yes to any of these,
Mm.
you've got
Possibly
your
good check.
you've got yourself some narcissistic personality traits on your hands.
Mhm. Wow, okay, I love that, and I think, so I know that and I now know that you really love movies as well, like the Hallmark checklist, and I think in your book you also put The Wizard of Oz and Dorothy and having those kind of movie analogies. So, specifically towards your chapter, you reference The Wizard of Oz
Yes.
towards your healing journey. Why is that? What is it, something personal to you? What's the story behind it?
So actually, I took that a bit from my second book about healing from narcissistic abuse because, and I used that kind of analogy the whole way through. Because if you think about the story of Dorothy, the movie opens in black and white, and she's in this humble beginnings and this beautiful home, and she is ripped from it by a tornado,
Right.
and then the tornado whirls around and whatever, and then she crashes down in Oz in a completely new world, and her everything is like damaged, and she comes out and she's like, what just happened? And so that feeling of what just happened, where am I, and what do I do now, is very much how it feels after you leave an abusive relationship,
Mhm.
and you just feel that like confusion and like, oh my god, like, okay, now what? you know and so and then the healing from the trauma of what happened is very much a journey similar to Dorothy's journey along the Yellow Brick Road, right?
Okay, okay. I do get that now. Thank you. So I with that kind of confusion there, when you're working with different clients and different women, I'm assuming you work more with women, right?
Yes, I do work with more women, but I do also have a few male clients as well, and they are equally as susceptible to this type of abuse as well.
Mhm. Okay, oh, perfect. So when you're working with your clients, do you kind of like relay them the same story, or is it kind of like different for each one of them?
Well, I mean, I actually provide a copy of my book to all of my clients because it can kind of help as a bit of a guide for the
Mm,
healing work that we're going to do together. And so they're familiar with the analogy. Um, and so, but it's not something that like we specifically focus on or talk about. It's more of a storytelling kind of feature, right? Of how to relate to the experience of what's going on.
okay, and from so what are some of the green flags to healing? Like how do you know you're accomplishing your healing goals, that you're getting better?
When we are able to successfully say no to people and not feel guilty about it,
Very nice.
when we are able to establish firm boundaries with people who don't like to have boundaries put in place, and we make sure that those boundaries are respected. So we don't say, I'm not going to allow a certain person to interact with me outside of work. And then the person texts and says, hey, do you want to grab lunch? We would then say, no, sorry, I'm busy. Right. And
Mm,
so being able to establish and maintain healthy boundaries for people that are maybe not so healthy to be around, because we can't escape them all the time, right? Especially if we're in a
right.
work situation. But establishing very firm boundaries and being able to keep those boundaries in place, especially with people who we identify as toxic. Being able to not beat ourselves up for what happened or
Mhm.
blame ourselves for being in this relationship. And that's a really big one. Is at the beginning, we all have this feeling of, oh my God, like I'm a smart, educated, successful woman. How could I let this happen? Like, what's wrong with me? Right. And so working through that and realizing that it actually wasn't anything wrong with you. You didn't, and it wasn't because of something you did wrong. The abuse is progressive and evolves over time. Right. And
Mhm.
so being able to let go and have that forgiveness for yourself, those are big kind of indicators of progress.
I love that, I love that. And is there, like, a kind of, a big milestone, like, you reach the end of the course, you get a certificate. Is there something like that?
I mean, we don't really have like a graduation ceremony. And it's more of like, how far along did you get in your healing work?
Mhm,
Where would you like to go from here? Would you like to continue on to do some more work together? We absolutely can do that. Or some people really feel like, okay, like this is so fantastic. I feel clear, I feel full, I feel ready, I'm going to go. And then they might circle back and like get in touch again in like another couple of months to check in to see how things are going, or like, I had a bit of a moment. Oh my gosh.
mhm.
But generally speaking, like the progress over the initial time, over the several weeks that we work together is really remarkable. And then it just depends on various factors as to whether they want to continue in the work in a therapeutic way, or whether they want to continue doing the work on their own.
Okay, perfect. And, Heather, for you as well, I know I told you I would kinda pick up on this as well, but, what's been happening after the book? What are some of your goals? What are you hoping to do?
So I'm continuing, of course, to focus on offering support to people who are struggling with this problem because, again, having been a person who struggled with this problem and lived through it and had to do the healing work, I know I really would have appreciated being able to work with someone who truly understood my experience, who had been through it. And so that is still a primary focus, is to be able to help people to recover from these things, and also to this year, my one of my goals for 2022 is to also start doing more collaboration work and consulting work with organizations and companies on how to create trauma informed workspaces so that when we go to work as
Right.
survivors of trauma, we're not in situations where we feel unsafe.
Mm. Oh, very nice. So would that kind of be like um removing yourself from the environment, or like learning the self defense? Like, what does it entail to be safe? Like, how could you create that kind of workplace?
So that's a really complex question that doesn't have an easy answer,
Yeah.
because it depends on a variety of factors. It depends on the current climate. It depends on the buy-in that you have from the higher level, like management. It
Mhm.
depends on other wellness strategies that have already been implemented, looking at the success or lack of success of those strategies, getting to know what the needs are from like people who work there, and then really kind of creating a like a strategic plan that is specific to that organization.
Okay, okay, very wow. Okay. So that is absolutely amazing. So thank you so much, Heather, for that, because I do want to see that. I think we're moving into a really nice direction as like the past few years, where we're doing like more like the self-care in the workplace, the collaboration in the workplace. So I think this would be very interesting to also see a trauma informed workplace as well. But that being said, so as we're kind of, wrapping up here, and I want to say thank you so much for joining us on our show today. Do you have any like one piece of final advice you would like to give to either a survivor or anybody out there?
Yes, my one kind of big message is that you are not alone, and that help is available, and that there is a wonderful life on the other side of toxic relationships.
Very beautiful. I love that. Thank you, Heather. And where can people find you on social media?
Absolutely. So, actually, the easiest way to get in touch with me is actually through my website because I have all of the links to my social media
Mhm.
is just right there. So, my website's very easy. It's heatherjkent.com. And there you can follow me on social. You can also click on a link to book a free consultation with me. You can, there's a link to my calendar right on my website, and you can book in a time to speak with me directly if you would like. And there's also links from my website to be able to download the books that I mentioned that are free for anyone who would like to read them.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you to our viewers who have been watching today. This has been presented by APSO, Awesome People Shaping Our World. Remember, you are awesome and you can make the world a better place. Thank you so much. Bye.